today is about males as enacted community. Males are central in the Jewish story. Their year is punctuated by feasts. How do we miss that? Like their most holy moments in the year, they are festivals and feasting. They do it 7 times a year. I think we should do it more. So now we have breakfast once a month. Because feasting and festivals are sacred moments. They have Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Unleavened bread, not unleaded. Yes. Unleavened bread. First fruits, Pentecost. The Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Weeks, Yom Kippur, the Feast of Tabernacles. Everything is built around, everything in their culture feeds into these festivals. Meals are central in Jesus' story. How do we miss this? His first miracle at a wedding. They had some nice wine at the wedding we were at yesterday. But imagine the wine that Jesus made. And I've got an invitation to a banqueting table where Jesus is the maitre d'. Hey, Jesus, can I have a glass of that wine you made at Cana? It's the best. But Zacchaeus, this tax collector that everybody hated. And Jesus, how do you stop someone being marginalized? You include them. And Jesus goes, Zacchaeus, I've got to come to your house. And Zacchaeus is overwhelmed and invites all of his friends. Levi, another tax collector. The people that Jesus hung around with. Would we welcome them at our table? If you've watched The Chosen, you kind of see this ragtag bunch of blokes around Jesus. And the people he collects, they kind of portray the tax collector as a little bit OCD, on the spectrum. He's an odd character. But you can imagine him, and then you've got a zealot who's passionate about the nation of Israel, and a collaborator, and the same bunch of people. Jesus, what on earth are you doing picking this bunch? Who would have picked them? God did. And so no matter what our history is, no matter what we've done, no matter who we are, no matter our foibles, God picks you. God picks you. There is nothing that can separate us from the love of God. The challenge for us is, do we receive that? Or do we continue to run with the limitations that we feel the world's imposed on us? And then, in the apostolic churches of the New Testament, in Acts and Corinth, hospitality is a vital part of church life. And I don't get how I've ended up kind of constantly turning up to one method of doing things. Churches originally met in homes around a meal. They didn't even have church buildings until the 3rd or 4th century. They met in people's homes. But we do that too. And if you're not part of a small group, can I encourage you? Get along. It's not just about intellectual study of the Bible together. It's about doing life together. Some of the things that we share together and pray for one another are things you wouldn't necessarily want known in a larger community. There's an intimacy and relationship about it. If you need to know more, talk to me afterwards. But that's how they met. So why is our typical gathering based around a lecture, classroom teaching model? Why do we do everything that way? So that makes sense when the majority of people are not educated. When the Bible's not available for everyone. When people are not able to read for themselves. And that's how it used to be. Part of the problem with the history of the church has been that the clergy were the only ones that were trained to read. So if people had a bill to pay, they'd take it to the local priest or minister to kind of read through and tell them what to do. If they received a letter from overseas, from a mother, from whatever, everything was managed by the church, and not all those church leaders were nice people. There was corruption there too. And so there's this kind of wrestle between the brokenness of our world and the purity of Jesus. Is that the only model? Because that's not the dominant model in the Old Covenant or the New Covenant or the history of the early church. We're living in a highly educated culture. And we have so much access. There's more access in this device. But my first foray into higher education, I started a degree in electronic engineering. And so part of what we had to do was a computer course. And so the computer was probably almost the size of this auditorium. And it had terminals around the outside, so there was a door into it that was locked, and air conditioners constantly keeping the thing cool. And terminals around the outside, and you had to book a terminal to actually do your assignments for the course. It was massive. With these floppy disks that actually were floppy. These big, massive things that you shoved in and you had to do your... and they were prone, you couldn't put them near anything magnetic or you'd lose all your work because it would just wipe it out. There is more technology, there's more capacity in this thing than in 10 of those computers that serve the whole university. Technology is advancing so quickly. And yet we're still doing things the same way. We've got to think about this. Doesn't mean it's all wrong. So that education and teaching is fundamentally part of our journey as maturing as Christians. Absolutely. You know, when Paul's talking to the Ephesian church, he says in leadership there's kind of 5 aspects. So apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic, shepherding, and teaching. So teaching is part of it. So it's not that we don't teach, it's how do we teach? Jesus doesn't change, but our culture's changed. And how do we communicate Jesus? We need to consider more avenues to grow as people. And it doesn't mean it's wrong, but we need to consider afresh how we connect with our community. Because I don't know about you, but lots of people I know would not sit still like you do for 20 or 30 minutes to hear somebody prattle on about Bible things. And I want to reach them too. So, I want you, in your imagination, imagine yourself, you've been invited to a prestigious religious event. It's hosted by the leader of the largest church. Important people are present. You're kind of asking yourself, why am I here? Politicians and councillors, and you recognise them from the paper, or probably these days more from Google searches. You've got a famous but controversial visiting speaker. There's plenty of them on the internet. And then, a tipsy woman in an overly tight dress loudly wraps herself around the guest speaker. How do you feel? How do you think the guest speaker feels? How do you think everybody in the room feels? How do you think the important people feel? And Jesus faces this very situation. This is Luke chapter 7. One of the Pharisees asked Jesus to eat with him. So he went into the house of the Pharisee and reclined at the table. And there was a woman known in the city as a sinner, who, when she learned that Jesus was eating in the house of the Pharisee, she brought an alabaster jar of perfume, and standing behind him, at his feet, weeping, she began to bathe his feet with her tears, wiping his feet dry with the hair on her head, and pouring the perfume on them. The Pharisee who invited him said to himself, if this man were a prophet, he would know what kind of woman is touching him. She is a sinner. And it's just this dynamic going on between this. Jesus has come into the place of a religious leader. And then this broken woman comes in. And she takes an expensive gift. There's debate about how much the alabaster box of perfume would have been worth. Some people say it was a day's wage. Some people say it was a year's wage. Whatever, it was important to her and precious to her. And yet, she gave it to Jesus. It's a house of a wealthy man considered righteous, and a woman considered unclean and contaminated. But Jesus displays the upside down work of grace. And, this moment between my apprehension of something happening and my response is critically important. As I grow as a follower of Jesus, is my response becoming more like Jesus, or am I continuing to be influenced by my fear of what the world might think? I call it the oops factor. I've mentioned it before. The oops factor. The moment I'll react and then I go, oops. That's actually not how Jesus would behave, and it's not how Jesus would have me behave. If I can shorten the oops factor, then I reduce the number of times I have to apologize for what I've just done wrong. Because I can actually catch myself before I do it. And that's the journey with Jesus. Maybe I should write a book titled Reducing the Oops Factor. But that's what it's about. Reducing that human reaction and instead allowing Jesus, through his Spirit within me, to minister into situations by just being Jesus to people. Relationship with God is seen in how we treat others. I said before, we can't just fake it, but over time, people see how you behave. Over the course of time, I often say to people, the best way to get to know someone is be around their kids. Kids don't keep secrets. If you go to somebody's house, the kids will let things slip. Kids kind of let you know how their parents really are, especially when they're younger. As they get a bit older, they're a bit more contained, we hope. But when they're younger, they just tell you stuff. But just, are my actions representative of my heart? Or am I trying to fake it? How would we be, right now, if a drunk, noisy person came through the door and started yahooing? And how would we be? I was back in Scotland on an occasion, and my young sister Susie was part of a church. And I went to the church, and when the pastor learned I was part of a church in Australia, he arranged to have a coffee with me during the week. In their service, there were about 12 people at the service. He preached a good message. It was a good service. And I was having a coffee with him. And he said to me, "Oh, you're lucky that the Sunday you came, we didn't have the two drunks walk in." I said, "Oh, okay." He said, yeah, every now and again, they must go somewhere on a Saturday night and have a late night. On Sunday morning, they just bowl in here, blind drunk. It can take us ages to get them out again. This is a man who had been praying for God to bring people to his church. But we need to think about that. The nature of the people who we see in life, the people we connect with. Are we welcoming to people who are not like us? Do we judge based on appearance, or do we have a heart to say, what's driving that behavior is brokenness and pain? And Jesus in me could be able to minister to that. Challenging question. Exposure to brokenness exposes my brokenness. I catch myself at times when I'm judging someone for their behavior. If I'll stop long enough, if I catch the oops factor and actually examine my own heart. What is it about their brokenness that's triggering me? Because what's coming from me is me, not Jesus, if I'm judging someone. And it's true for all of us. Exposure to brokenness exposes my brokenness. Hurt people hurt people. When we have unresolved issues, that's the great thing about journeying with a community of people as Jesus people. When people love one another, people love me enough to say, you're not yourself lately. What's going on for you? Or, look, you said something the other day which actually I found hurtful. Can we talk about that? Because then I have the opportunity to address my brokenness, to surrender it to Jesus and to be changed. And not just carry on in those patterns. It's not how I view Jesus, not just how I view Jesus, but how I view myself. The woman at the party knows her life is a mess. But Simon the host is not self-aware. He thinks he's okay. And there's a danger for us as followers of Jesus that we get to a place where we think we're okay. We're comfortable. And then we begin to look down on others. As long as you have breath in your body, Jesus still wants to work on your weaknesses and brokenness to make you more like him. He has not finished with you yet. There is stuff that he wants to resolve. Often it's stuff we're not necessarily conscious of. There are some things that come back to haunt me at times, and I'm aware of them. But there are other things that go on that I'm not aware of until somebody who loves me corrects me. I still, at times, hear a voice of a physics teacher who said to me, "McGarity, you will never amount to anything." He said it so many times. Now, I was a pest in his class. I get why he would be annoyed. But it's also why we have to be careful about what we speak over people. Because people carry that stuff. What are you saying to others? What are you saying to one another? What are you saying to yourself about yourself? There's a danger of paying lip service. In Mark 7 and Matthew 15, Jesus recounts this passage from Isaiah where he speaks about these people and he says, with their lips they honour me, but their hearts are far from me. And when we sing some of these songs, there's a danger that we pay lip service, that we don't engage with the actual truth of the words. It's just a song. They're not intended to be songs. They're intended to be opportunities for us to engage our heart with the heart of God, to honour and worship him. And in that, to be changed, to be challenged by what's going on. I don't want to be somebody who pays lip service. I don't want to be someone who says one thing and does another. And I wonder if people around me who will challenge me when that happens. Not to put me down, but because they love me and want me to actually measure up. Because that's what Jesus wants for me and for you. So what can we do to develop as authentic disciples? We can't just keep on doing the same things. We will not change by doing the same things. I'm not sure if it's been attributed to Einstein, but I'm not sure if it was him who said the definition of lunacy is to keep doing the same things and expect a different result. If we genuinely want to see impact in the community around us, in the world, if we genuinely want to be making disciples, how we do it needs to change. Busyness. Busyness is the sin of the 20th and 21st century. We are so busy. And I do it all the time. People say to me, how are you? And I go, oh, it's been a busy week. How are you doing? Busy. Yeah, I'm busy. But I'm busy because I don't take control and actually define this is what I'm going to do. Now, there are times and seasons of busyness. It's not. But this continually being driven because I need to pay a mortgage on a house that's larger than I need, or pay bills for a car or a boat or a motorbike that sits not used enough. We need to kind of challenge what time am I giving to my relationship with Jesus? And how is that then influencing the people around me? Meals can create and define a community and can recreate and redefine a community. Meals are really important. Over a meal, objective judgment becomes subjective friendship. There are things in our culture, there are ways of behaving that I don't really like, that I think God doesn't approve of. But when I sit down with people who are caught up in patterns of behaviour and ways of life and become a friend, I stop becoming a judge and I start thinking about how I can help and support them. And that changes everything. The church often has developed a reputation of objective judgment, standing on the outside and judging people, not getting alongside people and supporting them. From my perspective, that needs to change. Consider meals as integral to an enacted community, to actually being engaged in authentic community with one another. This guy, Tim Chester, and his material is part of what we're using at the moment. Hospitality involves welcoming, creating space, listening, paying attention, and providing. They are words of service. It's about serving other people. Now, I love, at meals, I love eating. I don't mind the eating and drinking part. But it's also about serving the people around the table. About making people feel welcome. About making people feel like they're actually important. Because they are important. They're important to God. Breakfast church and tonight's dinner church is not a novel idea. This is not new. This is us going back and trying to restore what the early church did. And the dinner church is not intended just for young people. We are hoping that young adults will connect with it, but all of us are welcome. It's an opportunity to be around a table together with a different group of people. Meals can shape and reshape a family. Dinner time is a cornerstone of a family's mental health. One of the biggest challenges that I don't have to be a prophet to predict this. In this coming generation, the biggest challenge will be mental health. Because we are shaped for relationship and community, and everything that the world is tracking down isolates people individually. And it's unhealthy. We used to have friends, now we watch them on television. Or we have a big list of people in a social media thing that are our friends. We've never met them, we've never spoken to them. We don't even know if their photographs actually who they are. We have fake friends. You know, and the whole COVID thing, I think the live streaming stuff and all of that is helpful, but it's not the whole thing. I've been in Zoom meetings, in board meetings on Zoom, where I've frozen my screen while a conversation's going on, gone and made myself a cup of tea, not engaged in the meeting, and then come back with my cup of tea. Now, if I'm in this room, and one of you, Ellen, gets up and walks out and goes and makes herself a cup, I know that Ellen, so afterwards I'll be going, Ellen, what's going on there? Ellen might be saying, well, you were putting me to sleep and I needed a coffee. But there's relationship, there's reality there that we don't see in two dimensions. And it is contributing to significant brokenness and mental health issues. And it's compounding at the moment because there's an increase in people with mental health issues. The mental health professionals cannot get people in to appointments. And so the mental health issues that people are extracting longer and longer and being more and more significant. If people are isolated, invite them for a coffee. I think one of the challenges for us as a church family will be to identify people in our community who are shut in and then just go and knock on the door. A couple of people did it for a couple across the street. We're going to have to learn to kind of get out of our comfort zone. Everybody's not going to come here. Are we going to go to them? The table can be a place of welcome, a place of healing, a place of forgiveness, of generosity, of authenticity, of grace. It's what Jesus did as he ministered. Will our tables be like that? And a good meal is a practice for our engagement with the kingdom of God.